Professor Friedman, would you assess the future of freedom and equality based on the consideration that the Equal Opportunity Employment Commission is enforcing an affirmative action program?
Well, I don't believe the so-called affirmative action programs are programs in the direction of either equality or freedom. I think they are programs in the direction of more governmental intervention into our private affairs. I believe that people ought to have equal opportunities to enjoy and use their resources, including the equal opportunities to make such deals of employment contracts with one another as seem appropriate to themselves. I do not believe that it is desirable that we move in the direction of having a government bureaucrat decide whether A may hire B or not, whoever A and B are.
Thank you.
And in consequence, I think programs of this kind are both reducing our freedom and reducing equality. And they will redound to the disadvantage of the very groups it's intended to help. I was citing this morning over here at William & Mary when I was talking to some of the students, a book that I recommend very strongly to all of you by a South African, former South African, he's now in this country, W.H. Hutt, called The Color Bar. And it points out how apartheid in South Africa got started as a result of pressure by trade unions for equal pay for equal work. Again, over and over, we have to look at the actual consequences of policies, not at the names of them. The immediate occasion that we're talking about now, to take the case that seems less tendentious, but is just as important. The equal pay for equal work is a claim for people supposedly for the feminist cause. Now, I believe that's an anti-feminist slogan. It will hurt the feminists. It will not help them. Why? I believe that every individual, man, woman, or child, should have an opportunity to get a job if he wants to and can do it. But now, if there are some people who are prejudiced, if Mr. Jones is a male chauvinist, and he would prefer to have a man rather than a woman, or Mr. Smith is a believer in feminine rights and would prefer to have a woman rather than a man, it doesn't matter. But take the male chauvinist pig. If you have a law that he must pay the woman and the man the same, and if he can find some way around having to hire the woman, he gets away free. He doesn't have to pay for his prejudice. On the other hand, suppose he has a prejudice, but we let people compete. Then the woman at least has a weapon of offering to work for less. And he has to pay for his prejudice. The free market, by enabling people to compete openly, is the most effective device that has ever been invented for making people pay for their prejudices, and thus for making it costly for them to exercise it. And what you do when you impose the equal pay for equal work law is that you make the expression of prejudice costless. And as a result, you harm the people you intend to help. Now, you may think this is purely hypothetical. I assure you there have been some careful statistical studies of this kind of phenomenon which show exactly these results. Yes, sir. I guess I'm supposed to go over to here.
Okay,
it's all right. Just say it over.
Can you hear me? Okay.
Yes.
I find the idea that paying a group lower wages is a way to make an employer pay for his prejudices unclear. His implied payment is a degree of discomfort which it would seem becomes manageable in view of the higher profits afforded. Could you clarify?
Of course, I'll be glad to. He doesn't get any higher profits. He gets driven out of business if he insists on behaving the way you're talking about. Because there'll be some other fellow there who will be willing to take advantage of those people who are available. And that other fellow will be able to undercut the first fellow. Most employers who discriminate on irrelevant grounds are not expressing their own tastes. They're transmitting the tastes of their customers. An employer who deliberately chooses less productive people or more expensive people in place of less productive because he has tastes in that way is going to be at a competitive disadvantage in the market. His costs will be higher than the other fellow's costs. And as a result, he will tend to be driven out of business.
I don't mean to imply he would employ less competent workers. The workers might be equally as competent. They're women or blacks or any other group that works for lower wages.
But if they work for lower wages and he refuses to hire them, I mean, go back. Let's see what's involved. If they're equally competent, then other people will have an incentive to hire them away and pay them higher wages, won't they? Unless everybody shares the prejudice. If there is anybody who is unprejudiced, they can hire them away and do a better job. But suppose for a moment that they're not equally competent. Suppose they really aren't as productive. Then whom are you benefiting by forcing him to pay them the same wages? You're hurting them. You're hurting him. He's going to be out of business. They're going to be out of jobs. Now, how do we know which are equally competent or not? How do we decide that? You're back in the dilemma that who's going to make the judgment? In a free market, we each make our own judgment, and if we don't interfere with it, anybody who lets irrelevant considerations enter in is going to pay for it. Because he won't be hiring the most efficient, the most competent, the cheapest groups. Let me go back to some stories along these lines that are interesting. At a time when there was great prejudice on the part of whites to be served by blacks in retail stores. Take a case like that. A storekeeper who insisted on hiring blacks would simply go out of business as customers would leave him. At that time, what happened? Businessmen tried to arrange things so as to have as few people in front as possible and as many people behind the back as possible. And you had them using the blacks who were disadvantaged behind because that was a cheaper thing to do. They were working their hardest to eliminate the effects of prejudice. Now, if you say they've got to pay the same price to everybody, regardless of anything, there's no incentive on them to work hard to remove the effects of prejudice.